Hello and welcome to a new tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how you can connect your new DualSense controller or your DualShock 4 controller with your Windows PC via Bluetooth and use programs like DS4 Windows to set them up correctly, change inputs however you like, and additionally on top we also add how you can display this controller then in your OBS via Gamepadviewer and via the Input Overlay. There's a few specifics, tricks and tips that I can add also in the end, specifically for use case, for example, where you want to change how these buttons work, maybe map them then to keyboards, and then that will be it. Of course, there's a timestamp down below, hopefully it works, and then you can pick the parts you want. We start first with the initial setup and connecting everything to your Windows 10 PC. In order to connect your DualShock or DualSense controller to your Windows 10 PC, I recommend using a good Bluetooth USB dongle. I personally have Bluetooth also on my motherboard, but that sadly did not yield the best results. The best results I had was this mini Bluetooth adapter version 4.0 by USB from Belkin. This one here in Germany costs 18 euros, and I imagine if you can find it anywhere else, it will be of equal pricing, say $20 for example in the US. It's a very high quality USB dongle, it's very small. I personally have attached it to my keyboard because there's a USB port on my keyboard and it works perfectly fine. There's around 1 to 2 milliseconds delay, usually like below 1 milliseconds really. It is very fast, very efficient, and does the job very well for me so far, no complaints. That's my recommendation if you want to have Bluetooth on your device. And here we have the USB dongle. Again, I just have it in my keyboard setup. It's super small, you can put it basically anywhere. The size factor is really great and the connection is super stable. Alright, how do we connect these two controllers? The DualShock 4 and the DualSense both work the same way. You hold the share button and then press the PlayStation button. Both together. And as soon as the controller blinks fast, as you can see here, it is in Bluetooth pairing mode. The same works also with the DualSense. Here, if you hold again, share, and after that then the PlayStation button together, it will also blink rapidly. Now these two are in pairing mode and you can go into your Windows Bluetooth settings to add them to your system. And here in your systems, basically add a new Bluetooth device. Not a game controller, it will show up anyway. Just click on it, pair it, and then will automatically, usually, just be added, as you can see here. Now both controllers are here. The DualShock 4 I just needed to add, the DualSense was already connected, but both are the same how you add them here. Alright, so you have now your controller connected to Windows 10. How do we set it up better so other games can read the controller inputs? Because the Sony controller is a little bit fickly, we can use a program called DS4 Windows, which is here developed and released by Yorchan 7. This program comes with a lot of cool things and I want to guide you through your way first time setting it up. What you need is basically just the latest release. What I'm going to grab here is the DS4 Windows 3.0.5 x64 for a x64 based system, and if you have an older version you can use still the x86 version, which is the 32-bit version. Most people though regularly have a 64-bit system and that's what you want to download. Alright, now that you have downloaded that zip file, just take DS4 Windows and put it on your desktop for example. You can also put it in your program files on C drive. For the tutorial here I'm just going to put it on the desktop. Inside DS4 Windows there's a lot of files, and what you want to do initially is just launch DS4 Windows, but I recommend run it as an administrator. So that gives you a much deeper connection to the system and allows for much easier hooks into other games that may use your controller. You just launch the program and this is how it looks like. If you do it the first time, there's a small update that you can do. If you have done already stuff with that, it's not a problem. In the settings here, there's a controller and driver setup. This is what usually opens after the first time launching. This is the window here. I've already installed the driver, so I don't need to do it anymore. But what you want is install the VIGE MBus driver. and that should be everything you need. If you're an older system like Windows 7, you may need to also install the Windows 360 driver, which you can get also, of course, from the official Microsoft sources. Again, this is based on Windows 10 right now, so all we need to just install that driver. I've already installed it, so that's all I need to do. So it's a further explanation here how to connect your controller already with Windows 10, which we already did beforehand. So we can close this window and go over to controllers. Now, my controller is connected and mapped already, paired with Windows 10. If I press the PlayStation button, it should boot up now. And DS4 Windows will recognize that controller. And as soon as the services start, it will also see the controller now being active. It would help if we start also the service in the bottom right. I forgot very briefly about that. There we go. As you can see, in this window, I have the DualSense here first and my DS4 V1 as well, which we also have connected. The DS4 is already charging right now, as you can see here indicated by the little plus, sitting currently on the side. For now, I will only focus on the DualSense. Both controllers basically work the same. What I will show you now with the DualSense will also work with the DualShock 4. This is just a newer version, which I imagine more people are interested in right now, but all the things that I show you here will also work with the DualShock 4. So how does DS4 Windows work? You have your controllers here and the inputs in order. So if a game has 1 and 2 controller support, for example, again, falling back to Metal Gear Solid 1, you can have 2 controllers set up at once and set the DualSense as your first and the DualShock then as your second one. There's a variety here with exclusive mode, which sometimes has a benefit. I personally have not seen any benefit, but if you launch your PC after a restart, for example, launch DS4 Windows first in admin mode, and then before anything else starts, like Steam, that also wants to use your controller, this could be exclusive mode and not sharing the controller with Steam, for example, just to be aware of that. It's not too important right now for the purpose of this tutorial, so I'm going to leave it out. What we have now is also profiles. Now, I have already a bunch of profiles, but if you start a program first, it will be empty. I'm going to show you how to set up a brand new profile and what you can do with that. So if you have your DualSense 4 here, we go to Edit in this drop down and select New Profile. And that will actually open a Select Preset window for you. As it says here, do you want to use a preset option? Choosing No will cause the profile editor to use an empty gamepad profile. I recommend first just starting with the profile. So we say yes. And there's 2 different directions we can go. With the gamepad, we can either take this DualSense controller or DualShock 4 and emulate an Xbox 360 controller, which many games are very much compatible with. But if you can also change your inputs based on what a program can accept, sometimes you can also use the DualShock 4 profile, which also works. For the purposes right now, I'm just going to start with a blank Xbox 360 controller and apply that. First, you want to give it your name. So it's an X360 controller, for example. And as you can see, this is a preview image of your DualShock 4. So if you want, you can click on the cross, for example, and that will give you a window what it would emulate. So currently the cross would emulate this A button here. As I said, default, you change it to the A button as well. And if you hover then with your cursor over the cross, you can see cross is mapped to A button down here. So it's the whole list down here, as you can see. And the coolest thing I personally think also is that with DualShock 4 and DualSense, we have this little touchpad here, the touch bar also. And that can actually work as a mouse pad, basically. As you can see, I'm using my finger here on the touchpad to move my mouse around. You can change that behavior, for example. You can set here, if you press these things, what to simulate. If you have a left mouse button, if you press the left half, you have a left click. So if I go on the desktop right now, you can see I can left click here as if I was using a mouse. If I use it on the right side of the touchpad, it should be opening a context menu. But it doesn't work right now, I guess. Always in the moment when you want to demonstrate something. What I personally think, that's a bit annoying if I don't use it in a game. I want to not move my mouse around. So you can also go here in this DS4 Windows setting on touchpad and change the output mode. Right now it's simulating a mouse. You can also just put it to controls. And these interactions here, you could map them, or if you leave them empty, that basically disables the touchpad function. So if I move my finger around now, as you can see, the mouse is not moving anymore. Another very good thing is you can also have this light flash with different colors. You can set up per profile which color do you want to show. And you can also show basically what battery percentage you have with the color. So you can start with green, for example, say, hey, full is, instead of blue, it's going to be green. And if it's empty, you're going to turn it to red, and then we'll slowly move over to that state. You can even flash it at different percentages. Very practical, I would say. So just look at control and like, oh yeah, it's green. You can see right now here, currently green because it's almost full. And if it goes low or empty when you need to charge it, then it will change to red. In the other options, there's also something very interesting here. As you can see, we have already emulated control in Xbox 360. Additionally, on top to what we've already set up, this is a setting that is key for Windows as an OS. With this built-in USB Bluetooth controller, I found you can also set the polling rate here to 1000 Hz 1 millisecond. That's just super fast, almost indistinguishable of any lag, and it works at least for my system here on my PC. It could be that if your system isn't as powerful, this polling rate won't work for you. You may want to lower it, but anything below 4 milliseconds slowly, starts to show some impact. Again, seeing here, emulate controller. If we go to game controllers, set up USB game controllers. This is a Windows standard window. You can see here, I have quite a bunch. My wireless controller usually are the ones that come in first and are basically native connections via Bluetooth to the Windows 10 system. I have a 2-axis 8-button gamepad, which we can ignore. This is a foot pedal that I use for my streaming services. And then on top of that, we have a controller Xbox 360 for Windows and controller Xbox 360 for Windows again. These two are the current ones I have via DS for Windows. DS for Windows basically takes your controller and maps it to another one. So if your setting is here Xbox 360, it will say Xbox 360. And if I change it now to DualShock 4, save, and there you go, it has this profile loaded, it changed it to a different controller. It's not here anymore listed, because it will be shown as a wireless controller. If I change it to an Xbox 360 controller again, there it appears again. So this DualShock 4 setting in the emulated profile has an impact how Windows views your controller. For many applications, basically older games that have been developed basically for an Xbox 360 controller that connects via USB, this emulation of an Xbox 360 controller is key. Again, if I apply it here, save, it should also change now to an Xbox 360. Yet again, it doesn't want to do the thing I want it to do. Pretty sure though that that is the controller I have. That's the basic explanation of it all. If you have a different controller, so that's just a foot pedal for example installed, you have to make sure that in the advanced setting you want to have your preferred device to be the 360 controller or your DualShock controller. In my case, I had it that older games like Metal Gear Solid 1 all of a sudden picked the foot pedal as its primary controller, and it did not accept from a second controller, keyboard, or controller bindings. So you got to make sure this is your primary one. This is why this whole window is still important, because the order matters, especially for older games. So what can we do now with all this setup here? How do we continue on? I can leave it here. In the later part of this video, I'm going to show you how you can also set up different things with this controller. For example, if you press cross, as you can see, you can do a whole other set of controls as well. For example, the keyboard. So we're going to come back to that one. But now let's move on how to display your controller in OBS. Alright, so we have installed DS for Windows. Our controllers are now being emulated as an Xbox 360. Plus we can use our additional buttons such as the PlayStation button or the touchpad for different purposes if we would like to. Basically, that's all we need right now for playing games. If you want to on top also display for your streams that gamepad on your OBS stream, for example if you're a speedrunner, then we usually use Gamepadviewer for that. Controller, now Gamepadviewer allows me to be used. What we're seeing is currently viewing. We just drop down to, say, player 1. And what we have here standard is an Xbox One controller. Well, we have a DualSense. We want to show a DualSense. What do we do? What you could do now is take this window, capture it with window capture, just input the color here and remove it background. But that's not really that nice. What we can do instead is use the generate URL function and use this in the browser source. That will automatically give you a transparent background so you can move this thing over your screen. But again, I have a DualSense and I want to show a DualSense, so what do? There's different people that remap these basically web page files. This is all just a web page in the end of the day, and you can make it look like a DualSense. So what you have here is different values and arguments. First off, P means the player, so we're player 1, we want to have the first controller, and the S stands for the skin. So with the S of value being 5, we emulate a DualShock skin. And if you add another command, which is called edit CSS equals, and then the URL, for example, of a style sheet file, which I'll provide you in the description down below, you can map this DualShock controller and make it look like a DualSense. Now, let's take this whole URL, player 1, skin 5, the DualShock, and then the re-edit of the style sheet, and put that into OBS. Alright, so here is my OBS window. I have changed a few things around. This is a very blank slate. What we want to do is we add a source. We're going to use our browser source, just call it Gamepadviewer, and here we are. So in the URL, we paste in what we have copied earlier. So Gamepadviewer with all the variables. And the width and the height can just stay. Everything is basically that. If we load that, you can see like, oh, there we go. This is now our DualSense controller. We can move it around. There's no problem here of transparency. The background is actually cut out. And as you can see now, again, I don't know, Gamepadviewer and browser sometimes doesn't work. As a browser source here in OBS, it gives actually controller away. You can press all the dpad buttons and it works as it should. You can even change the dual sticks here. Dual sticks, analog sticks. And of course, also all the face buttons work. I press X, I see circle, circle, square, square, triangle, triangle. Everything works as you can see. Even the option and select work. So this is basically the standard setup. Just have a Xbox 360, select the skin for DualShock 4 and edit the CSS file. Again, the link in the video description down below. And then you have your full DualSense screen ready to go. Even if you press the sticks, you can see here, there's an input for that. Super easy. Thank you so much, Major Zero, for setting up that CSS file. And as you can see, you can even modify files if you want to download them. Then you can see them working here, even with mouse and keyboard. So this is basically how you can display all of that with a DualSense. If you don't want to have the DualShock display, I personally prefer it, you know, it's a nice design. Why not show it off? And now in the next and final part of this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set it up for using also keyboard inputs and how to map that again Gamepadviewer. So this keyboard inputs also show what you actually press in the real world. So pressing X and square here makes the machine think I'm pressing Control and Shift. But you know, for your viewers, of course, you want to show, hey, I'm pressing actually these buttons on the gamepad, not on the keyboard. So let's move on. Alright, welcome to the third and final part of this tutorial. I'm going to start DS4 Windows again, open it up. And as we have it here. So my DualSense here is using Medical Solid 1 PC. Sometimes it can be very useful that you want to change a few inputs. So your gamepad does not work as a gamepad, but partially individual keys work for your keyboard. That can lead to some issues also then for Gamepadviewer, because Gamepadviewer only reads your controllers, your gamepads, which Windows has in its settings. Again, you can see it for yourself. Used to be game controllers. These are the things Gamepadviewer can see right now. So in order to show Gamepadviewer that we have pressed the keyboard, we need to trigger out a few things. But first things first. My example here, as you can see, will utilize the cross for the left shift and the square for the left control. In Metal Gear Solid 1 on PC, these two settings are key because there's a boss fight where you need to beat him with the keyboard necessarily. You can't use the gamepad. On the console, you would have to switch to a second controller or controller port 2. PC version just asks you to use the keyboard input. Additionally, there's other things also that I didn't mention prior. You can also change your dead zones for controllers. And for example, your analog sticks can be used instead of hotkeys. So if you have a number key or any F key that you want to press, you can just use the analog sticks if you don't use these in the game. So in Metal Gear Solid 1, we use the D-pad just for regular axis control. And then we have here our analog sticks to use with keys basically on the keyboard. So up is then 9. If you want to make it even better, showing your controller readings, this red circle means that is the dead zone. I set up for both controllers the dead zone here to be 0.95, so really only the outer edges are being registered as a hit. That makes it easy. For example, when I press, it can be that I'm drifting a little bit. So when I hold L3 and R3, you can see it's swiggling around a little bit. It does not automatically also trigger the other hotkeys. I only want to press L3 and R3, and then when I really want to use the controllers and the hotkey function, I really have to go all the way, which makes it easier to control naturally. That's why I recommend for Metal Gear Solid 1 specifically also to change your dead zone to 0.95. Also, as you can see here, controller readings, there's like between 1 to 2.5 milliseconds delay here with the USB controller that I use, so that for sure is fast enough for any input. Now, we have set up all of this here to our keyboards. How do we display that with Gamepadviewer? The answer is we don't. We actually trick around a little bit with it. So what I utilize is an OBS plugin, which is called Input Overlay. As you can see here, this can display all sorts of inputs. You can use your mouse, you can use your keyboard, and also your gamepad. And what's cool really is that it's a freestyle thing. You have an image file that serves as your reference, and you have a script file that just says, hey, when this button is pressed, show this part of the image. That's the basic gist of this whole thing. How do you install that? Well, I go to releases here. And I recommend not going yet to 5.0 because this is a pre-release, it's not fully done yet. It came out just a few days ago. What I recommend right now, at least until 5 is fully done, use the version 4.8. Links again will be in the video description down below. Download that input overlay zip file, and then we install that into your OBS. What basically is in this zip file is the plugin itself. So if you go into plugin folder, there's data and OBS plugins. What we need to do with these two folders is to put them where OBS is installed. So in my system, that would be just C, program files, OBS Studio. There you can see the same two folders, data and OBS plugins. So basically just drag and drop them here. And yes, replace files in case you need to. I've already installed it here, so I don't need to. Just skip that step for my case here. And then once that is here, I can launch OBS and show you how to set it up. But before that, in this release, there's also presets. So if you go into presets folder, there's different things that you can use, such as using just arrow keys, a gamepad, mouse, QWERTY keyboard, WASD if you want, and other things. And I will show you also how you can use it yourself with different applications. And that's how we're gonna fix and show that Gamepadviewer button press, although we technically press a keyboard button. Alright, so here we are. This is now my DualSense again. Again, this is a reskin of the DualShock 4 skin. I can press, D-pad here, as you can see. Pressing D-pad shows everything. Press triangle, circle. But when I press X and square, it does not show because we have mapped X and square to a keyboard button. How do we fix that? So we have installed Input Overlay. So if we add a new source here, we have Input Overlay as a new source. Just say as is. I'm going to use it like that. And this window is basically how it all works. Again, there's an input field for the overlay image file, and there's a layout config file. Let's add the image first. So here is my set of data. And for the fix, I have created a simple PNG file where we have the cross and the square. You just double click that here and you can see this is how it looks like. Now, when I press X and square, it still doesn't do anything. And that's why, because we need the settings first. So this layout config file, that's the one we need. This is a very simple text.ini file. I say simple, but simple enough to understand it. If we switch quickly to VS Code here, you can also do this in a regular text editor. We see how this whole thing works. So I will very, very briefly go through this thing and then show you how it works. There we go. So this .ini file basically has a very simple structure. It's different things that we need to tell the plugin and also the setup. So how many keys do we have? Well, as seen as in a picture here, we want to have 2 keys to show. The duplication is just that we have an unpressed state and a pressed state. Now, what layout type do we want? We have 1 for mouse, 2 for keyboard, 3 for controller. You would think we're putting here controller, but actually we have 2 for keyboard because again, when we press X and square here, we told these for Windows to press a keyboard button instead. So if we want to change that, we want to show here a keyboard press that we need to listen for. How many rows do we have? We have 1, we have 2 columns because 2 buttons. What's the size of them? It has in this file the width of 260 pixels and the height of 260 pixels. There's no extra space between them. And it has 2 buttons per row. The full thing, 2 buttons together, is just twice the amount of the height. So 2 times 260 is 520. And that's basically all the initial setup we have here. Now we can move on and set up the rest of the ini. We have key order here. So going from top left to bottom right to show, hey, what is actually the key name basically. And the system has your hex code basically saying, okay, if you find this hex code in the input, that is the button you need to react to. So what I have here, left control and left shift, that's basically the 2 codes here. Just set a comma between them and you're good to go. The whole set is linked in the description down below here. It can be found also on GitHub.io. Though be wary, as you can see here, this is the file that you can refer to. So if you want to have an F key, for example, let's say with F1 here, you use this code 0x003b. And then when you put that in that file, it will see if you press the F1 key. One thing I found out though, there's a small mistake in here, which we need to tell the editor. If you have the arrow keys, so not on the numpad, but the actual arrow keys, this 0 needs to be an E. So it's a double E. And then it will actually listen to the system event. Found that out through trial and error. So again, we only have here the key order, top left, bottom right. So it's left control, left shift. The key width and the key height is both 1 times the setting we have. If you have a spacebar and want to show it as a white spacebar, you need to say, hey, it's worth 8 of these, for example. That is an example in the actual presets. And we need to give it a direction. So in the key row, we have the first counting from 0, 2 buttons. And then in the columns, we have the first column 0 and 1. So that's why it's 0, 0 and 0, 1. Remember, you need to end the .ini file here with an empty space. So just have 1 line break. You can save that and put this file then into OBS. Again, this is a very, very brief situation. Check out the presets that come with the release of Input Overlay. They give you a much clearer sense. This is just the case that I use right now to get Control and Shift to show again a cross and square for the gamepad. So with that being said, having now explained everything, just browse now. I'm going to use the DualSense Fix High Res, which is also corresponding ini file. And as you can see, the bottom row vanished. That's because now the input knows what to do with the image file. It hides the pressed state and only shows the pressed state when I press the button. So now if I press left control or left shift, it will show instead here our cross and square buttons. And as you can see, if I press X and square on our controller here, so X, it also shows X. Because through tricking necessity, again, we press the button on the controller. DS for Windows comes in and says, well, dear system, I'm pressing now a keyboard button. That's by pressing a gamepad button. And now we need to reverse that basically, is now for the display again, we need to listen to the keyboard button and show visually then a gamepad button. And that's how we can do this. Now we have only these 2 buttons next to each other, like you can't just put them next to that. So the trick is basically splitting them up, make a duplicate of that. And how we do it is simply, we just go here, copy, then paste, duplicate. Now with 2 times the same overlay. I'm going to take the first one hold the Alt key and take this right box here so I can trim it down. And now I only have the X button. The second one, I can Alt again, click the left, and then only have the square button. Now I'm going to increase a little bit this DualSense controller here so you can see it more easily. And now what we want to do basically is just take this, make it fit, put it right there where it belongs. A little bit roughly, but yeah. There we go. So it is a bit visible that these are not the exact same image files. I could change that, fix that, but if you usually make the gamepads part of a whole scene, they're smaller anyway, and these buttons get so small for fact that actually you wouldn't notice. So, but now, hey, when I press X and square, see now, X, square, it shows again. So basically, now we can press X and square. A video game would notice that as a control and shift input, not a gamepad input. And then for OBS, we reverse that logic, take the keyboard input and display them as gamepad input. And that's basically how we can fix them. Bit stupid, but some games necessitate that. And especially for example, Metal Gear Solid 1 on PC, it's a bit tedious to play the Mantis fight on keyboard. So we came up with this way in order to use these for Windows, a gamepad, to put out a keyboard input that the game reads. And to show it back again on stream, we use this way to reverse that logic. This whole thing, again, also works with DualShock 4. I'm going to show you that quickly. All I need to do is just take away that edit CSS file, say skin 5, and there we go, it loads in the standard DualSense. It's a bit dark. Okay. I added a dark, bright background so you can see it better. So, ooh. Now this is our DualShock controller. Of course the buttons are not matching, but that's no problem. I will also add these files for the standard DualShock colors, and now you can put them on top of each other. Need to put them a bit better here. Roughly, I think that's good enough. Square also needs to change the image file. There you go. And that's it. You couldn't tell that these are individual files, but that works. So whether you use a DualShock or DualSense, you can also show that now how you want with this little trick. Now, I would suggest really this whole setup, except for the color source, but having a basically scene dedicated only for this gamepad input makes it super easy to align it as much as you want. And then if you change, make a new source, for example, you can add again the scene 1, that would be our gamepad control. And now if you resize that, put it for example in the corner here, then you don't need to mess around with very, very small aspects of the buttons. Instead, you can have it in your own scene, fix that somehow, change directions, anything what you want. And then the whole scene where you have your game, your webcam and everything, you just have that very simple one setup here that you can resize and put around as much as you want. Actually very much easy to do in the latest OBS versions. Alright, and that should be everything. If you have questions, ask them in the comments down below. This is a very specific use case, I know, but it was useful for some people, especially on our Metal Gear speedrunners Discord. Check them out if you want to learn anything about Metal Gear Solid, and how to speedrun them. My name has been House here, your tutorial master. Hope it was useful to you, and I'll see you soon again. Have a good night, and see you soon.